Leaders, real life leaders.
Hi guys, welcome to today's episode, and I'm so excited to have with you Colin Hunter. He's an author, a mentor, a coach, a founder, and CEO of Potential Squared, and he's got a new book coming out, and so we're so excited for him to be with us. Colin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Chantel. Welcome, everybody, and hopefully this is a good use of your time to listen to me. I'm basically an imposter syndrome sufferer who's a recoverer, who's a leadership coach, an author, and a mentor. So I run a business called Potential Squared, and we run right across the globe. So we deliver coaching and leadership training. But I wrote a book about Be More Wrong because I had so many screw-ups in my career, and I suddenly realized that a lot of those screw-ups were making me successful. So I thought I would write a book about them, and also my clients and how they've done exactly the same. So that's a bit about me. So I'm here to talk about screw-ups today. That's basically what I did.
So let's give us a kind of a glimpse of the book. So what's your favorite parts of it? Give us like a little bit of a tidbit.
Yeah, so if you're a Lord of the Rings fan or a Harry Potter, I'm from the UK, from Britain, so Harry Potter's a big one for us. But there's a hero in all of us, basically. If we think about how we might start our career, or we might start in anything we do, there's a hero in us that we want to release. And a lot of people need the guide and the help. And the book is about the hero's journey. So how does the hero, with a guide, so think Dumbledore and Harry Potter, or think Gandalf and Lord of the Rings, how do they help and guide people to be heroes and create heroes? So I started my career believing that my role was to create heroes of the people I work with. And I suddenly realized that they need to have a guide to help them on a hero's journey. So the favorite part for me is that story of heroes who almost leave the village. They go experience good and evil, like all of us do in our lives. And then they come back to the village changed, and they see the village and their life in a different way. That's what the key part of the book about is, and it's all about being more wrong to do that. So allowing yourself to fail and fail towards a purpose, whatever that purpose is for you, Chantel. Yeah.
So give us a real practical example. So we have the podcast is called Real Life Leadership. So I want you to give us a real life story of something that's happened where we can apply one of your principles to it.
Yeah. So think about conversations. Think about the world we live in at the moment and the real conversations we need to have, whether it's diversity, whether it is conversations with people's performance, or whether it's talking about what's happening in the COVID pandemic and the hybrid ways where people have been working from home. And to do this, to have a real conversation about what's really going on in people's lives is difficult. And as a leader, as people living it, we've had a heavy lift over the last 18 months. But if we think as a leader, they have had that heavy lift of lifting themselves plus lifting others. So the whole principle is, how do we start that conversation? How do we have that difficult conversation with people? And so a real example of that is a lot of organizations are starting to send their people back to the office, or they're starting to send some of their people back to the office and some from home. And if you're anything like the people I know, there's some who have young families who have quite enjoyed the fact that they've had family time. There are some who are desperate, who are younger, single, who want to get back to the office. And what we've got to try do is create a level playing field for everybody to be successful. And we've got to think about the way we're running our business, whether it is a real estate business or whether it's a finance business. We've got to find a way. So what we do is we create playgrounds, and we help leaders to create a safe playground for people to explore those conversations. So to give you a real example, we use professional actors, some that you will have seen in films like Four Weddings and a Funeral. You will have seen in others like Dallas. And we use them to start to help people to craft stories of how to have difficult conversations in that space. And let me give you a real conversation that is happening with me at the moment, where we've got somebody who's left the business and we've got a very junior person who's been promoted into a senior role. How do you have those conversations about him stepping up in a role, to grow, to develop? And unless you have a place to practice, unless you have a place to think about the different approaches you can take, most of us will bumble through, we'll have a go, but we'll fail. So that's what we talk about in our work, is about how we create playgrounds to let people to be more wrong, to allow them to have the right conversations.
So let's do a conversation with me and you right now.
Cool.
We'll pretend that I'm not performing up to your standards. Let's take a look at what that conversation would look like.
So it all depends for me, Chantel, what that conversation is, because if it is, let me just give you an analogy in here. If I was having the conversation with you, there's two principles I would have. If you're not happy in your role or you're not performing your role, the first context I would always explore is whether you own or rent your role. And that's a mindset for you. So we would explore that conversation saying, so what's the difference between owning and renting your house? And when you think about owning your house, you're thinking about that it's yours. You're going to invest in it. You're going to take risks in it. You're going to feel that you have passion about it. Whereas if you rent a house, what a lot of the times you're doing is you're asking the landlord to take care of it. And you're thinking about your next place. And you're always looking at your rent. You're always looking at cost. And it's not a passion for a lot of people to rent. So the first conversation I'd be having with you in that space in the Be More Wrong is, are you the person who wants to own this role or rent it? Yeah. So that's the first bit I'd be having on there.
I love that, because let me stop you for just a second, because I want you to give some things that you can do to help people to own their role versus rent it. And I'll give you an example that we've done is that in our company, we made it where people have A, ownership stock in the company, and B, where every time they recruit, we've created basically like an MLM, like where there's 5 levels. Yep. So there's 5 different levels for people. And so it goes, okay, well, if you recruit one person, depending on how many people you recruit, you either get 10, 15, or 25% of everything that comes into the company that person brings in on that first level. Then on the second level, 5%, third, fourth, and fifth. There's 5 levels that they can get. And I feel like that really just kind of the best way to say it is just what you said. Are you renting your role or are you owning their role? They all of a sudden feel like, okay, I've got buy-in to this company now. And I feel like the more people I recruit, the more money I'm going to make. So I'm vested in it. Can you give a few more examples of companies that you've seen that have done things to entice their people to feel ownership?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me because, Chantel, what I find is that I'm a salesperson, so my background is sales, and my boss always used to say profit is freedom. So he always used to say, if it was a company car, if you give me more sales, I'll give you the next level in company car. So a bit like your analogy, some people are motivated by that profit, that money coming into the pocket, but others are motivated by a passion, an ownership for an area. So if you give something, for example, if you look at a particular area of a product, one of my most passionate moments I had in my career was when I owned a product launch from beginning to end. And I was quite young. I was only about late 20s to be able to own that. And you give them support. My boss was brilliant in there. Alan Boyce was brilliant in there because he just said, it's yours. And it's yours to be successful and screw up. And here's the support. And there was a guide. And therefore, for me, the owning of it was I owned from the plan to the execution. I remember on the final day, I had the pitch and I had all the scripts. And I was, you can imagine if you think about running a large event, I had that moment of real pride, but also panic. And one of the people running the auto cue just played a joke on me, and he changed keywords in the auto queue just before we were about to go live, about 30 minutes beforehand. And I noticed it, and he was running through, and I said, oh my God, the auto queue's gone wrong. And he laughed and joked, and the whole team joked and laughed. And he said, I wanted to do this because I want you to be relaxed. I want you to be laughing when you go through and run this. So there's another example, not money, but it's about ownership of it. So there's another example of that. The other thing for me about owning their role is, and this is something I strongly believe in, is when you think about somebody coming into your organization, a lot of organizations try to hold on to their people and they tie them down with money, incentives, whatever it is they try to tie down. I'm a strong believer in growing your own talent. So in a lot of cases, like another organization I had, they used to celebrate when headhunters used to ring. Yep. They used to celebrate how many headhunter calls they'd had a week. because those people owned the role. They owned them so much that their network and the presence and the brand in the market was huge. And that was because they owned. If they were renting the role, then people didn't want them because they weren't going to do the hard work. They weren't going to do the heavy lifting. They weren't going to get close enough to your customers in there. You just think about how much it takes to build a reputation, how easy it is to destroy. Those are the heavy lifters. And therefore, if they have a passion, they have an ownership for it, that's great. But I'll say one final thing, Chantel, if it's helpful for me, it's the quality of the leadership that makes it whether you own or rent it. Because most leaders try to micromanage, they try to get involved, they recruit in their own image. And for me, a lot of this is about to own particular roles, whether it's a technology role or it's a sales role. It is about recruiting the right person with the right passion, and it's not always recruiting in your own image. So that's where I would say where you truly own it because it's been carved out, because it's you, it's authentic. Yeah.
So let's talk about a few other things as far as that goes, like involving employees in goal setting and planning activities, or helping explain the why, or letting them choose the how, or, delegating authority, not just the work. So give us some like real practical examples of that to really encourage employees to take ownership.
Well, I think one of the things, and I was listening to a few of your previous podcasts, Chantel, and one of them was around the systems and habits, James Clear, Atomic Habits. So for me, there's a system for one thing around sales, but there's a system for how you develop yourself and own your own role. And so therefore, if I go back to the systems piece, the fact is everybody runs their life in a different way, and therefore they need to own their own systems. And a lot of that is driven by their own purpose as well. So if you go back to Simon Sinek's purpose, starting with why, which you're talking about there, then people will only fundamentally give you their sweat and blood if it is driven towards their own purpose. So it's about identifying their own purpose in there. Now, one of the guy I was talking to you about before, who we promoted, he always wanted to join the army. That was his passion. That was where he wanted to be. Now we're trying to work with him to create a playground to work out what his purpose is. So as a leader, I've got to establish, and I've got to play around with conversations with him to try and establish what his purpose is. So purpose is one thing. Once he's got his purpose, the Rock will tell you that the hardest worker in the gym will always have something they are working towards in their life. And therefore the purpose will allow them to fall forward and fail forward to something in there. So those are some of the other things that as a leader you need to capture. But you can't just take a cookie cutter and say, right, this is the way. It's about the power of the conversation. It's the ability to have the real conversation in the moment. And everybody is different. Everybody may be motivated by different things. And that's the struggle that leaders have in having those conversations.
I loved what you said earlier about profit is freedom. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one for me because if you think about, even in the sales environments, and you think about if you're desperate for your next sale, if you're desperate for your next pound and dollar, and there's actually in writing a book, there's a brilliant one, which is take hunger out of the equation when you're writing a book. In other words, the top writers will always tell you, find another job while you're writing a book, so that it's not the money that is feeding you and your family in going here. And it's the same principle when you're in anything that you do. If I earn what I can spend, then it's valuable. And if you have the profit is freedom. So therefore, for me, iterating it up. So for example, at the moment, we're thinking about crowdfunding one of our projects to do that. So we're actually getting clients to sign up with a proposition through our brand, which will, the first 1,000 to go into, will allow us to have the investment to invest in a new product. And there's the profit. So the profit is freedom. It gives you a choice about what you do. And it's the same with salespeople. The more you sell, the more money you make, the more you have, as long as you invest it and you keep it, the more you have freedom to iterate, to experiment in terms of what you do. And the less pressure you feel in terms of what you want to mistakes you want to take. And that's the whole principle about the book, which is, how am I going to be more wrong? We think about whatever it is, financial services, wealth, luxury service. Everybody's experimenting at the moment. The demand from customers is always increasing. But to do that, you've got to have profit and the profit to reinvest, and that gives you freedom. So how do you make yourself and how do you work hard to make yourself profitable? The only way to do that is to reinvest it. Yeah.
So when leadership faces a crisis, it needs to engage right away,
Yeah.
right? And so right now, I think the biggest thing that I'm hearing from my friends who are coworkers, I'm not coworkers, that own other businesses, the number one thing, and I mean, it's just almost every single CEO is saying this phrase, I can't hire anyone. Like literally trying to hire someone right now is like trying to get a Tic Tac out of Moby Dick. I mean, they're just like, I can't do it, Yeah. It's very frustrating and everyone's just, I'm hearing that. And my first reaction when I hear that is like, well, if you say that, right, then you're going to believe it and then it's going to manifest and it's just going to go down this downward spiral. But I've heard it over and over. So why, number one, why is hiring great people so hard right now? And what can you do to hire top talent at this time?
Probably give you 2 or 3 answers to that. So one is, it's almost looking back at history about how you operate as a leader. For me, the top firms are not struggling in hiring, because they are profitable, they've got the right culture, and they're working in the right way. So the first thing I would always say is looking back at how do you make yourself attractive to hire. Now, for a lot of organizations, that's too late. They've created a culture, and how do they redefine the culture in there? So the second piece for me on culture is you start to look at how you make it fun. And the whole principle about playgrounds is, if you think about, I was at an organization, and it had this organization on certain floors in the building. And we went up to floor 4, and the door opened on the elevator, the lift. And this was Google's floor. And Google's floor was fun, engaging. It was positive. People were smiling as they were walking in and out the elevator. I went up the next floor, opened the doors. This was this organization, remain nameless, but their floor. And when you looked at that floor, it was gray, dull, and people weren't smiling. So for me, there's a piece for the reason people don't attract people into their organizations is because of the culture, whether we like it or not. I can offer to pay an extra $1,000, $2,000, $20,000 a year to get somebody. But people are more discerning nowadays around what that organization stands for, what its cause is, the purpose, going back to that. So therefore, you have to change your culture. And if I look at hiring from within, that's the next element of it. So many people hire when they have gaps and they don't grow their own. And we've done that. We've made the same mistake. We've tried to hire senior salespeople or senior operations people. And what we found is the best way to do it is to grow your own, because if they've grown up with the organization, they've had the ideas, it doesn't take long. They've grown up with the ideas, then they have a passion and the ownership for it. So I'm not giving them a simple solution, because it's not. You can throw money at a solution, it doesn't work. For me, it's about the culture and you change. And it, again, final comment is that it would depend on the organization. Because I've worked for organizations that are only driven by sales. When's the next sale? And the culture is ruthless. So therefore, the risk and the opportunity for people to join is another thing you need to look at. Why did they join?
So what about someone like maybe hiring? Because I know for me, one of our hardest talents to find is web developers. Like they seem to be like very, very difficult right now to find. And what would you say to someone like even me that would say, okay, I'm struggling to find a web developer right now. We need to find another one. And for us, we can find one that's not here locally, and we have some web developers that are not local, and we're okay with having a few, but we do need like 2 more that are on site. And so that's even harder because we're not like in the tech part of the world either. So what kind of advice would you give to me if I said, this is a position I really need to hire for. I'm struggling. Where do I need to put my mindset, and what do I need to do to kind of get that going?
So we've only been in 2 situations like that, just exactly like you're going through. And I suppose the answer is one is go virtual. Yep, which is what we do.
And what's crazy is we are virtual.
Yeah.
And we only have one location. We have our corporate office, and then everything else is virtual. So you're saying like, okay, well, you're a virtual company, like get a virtual web developer.
I mean, the bottom line is, if you're a virtual company, why wouldn't you? I mean, we struggled. We had a small town that we were recruiting in, and we struggled to get the right people. We went virtual, and suddenly we had loads of opportunities. And I do think the other thing is that we've had a mindset, Chantel, for a long, long while that you need to have an office to go to. And for certain groups of people, that's right. But for web developers, a lot of them will be happy that a lot of them be running their own business in the background, whether they're working for you or not. So having that commute added in, no, it doesn't work for them. Yeah. So we work with the technology companies where they've given the flex for people to work round the clock in their own space and their own time. And my own honest opinion is, on the web developer side, there are project managers on the web developer side that are useful to have internally, whether in project meetings. On the web developer side, then as long as you're giving clear brief back, check back, as we call it, a clear brief with checkbacks in there, why wouldn't you trust people? I mean, the trust element is huge in here. People are out. If we're outcome focused, we can trust people to get on with it, and their reputation is strong. Otherwise, if they deliver shoddy work, then their reputation is going to be shot. So that would be my encouragement. I know it sounds like a simple solution. It's easy, more difficult to do as a leader to run a virtual business, as you know. But that would be my advice and guide. Yeah. Got it.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. Tell me anything that you want listeners to know that I haven't already asked them. Well, that I haven't asked you. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in here. For me, if I go back to the quote that you've used in previous podcasts, the systems of leadership and the systems of how you think about things are key. But I've got 3 C's that I always give people as a focus on a leader. One is confidence. So how do you develop your confidence, your physicality and your vocality? You talk knowledgeably. That's a lot of people will follow people just because they have confidence in what they do. So develop that. The second thing is conviction and values. So be clear on your values, whether it's money, it's commercial, whether it's a passion for a particular topic, whether it's a passion for real estate, finance, hospitality, whatever it is. Discover your passion, because conviction will drive people and people will follow you. But the most important one for me nowadays is connection, the agility. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, as we've learned with the pandemic. And therefore, if I was to leave everybody with one thing, there's a term called anti-fragile, which was formed in a book called Taleb, and the new definition of resilience is the ability to thrive in chaos. That's what we need to learn, and that's what the book is about. Yeah. So
awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for being with us today. Tell listeners where they can find your new book.
It's on, if you go to the website, BeMoreWrong.com. If you go to Instagram, it's at BeMoreWrong, Twitter at BeMoreWrong. But if you go to any of those sites, it will take you and you can find a new book. It's out 21st of September 21. So on an auspicious day, 21/21/9. So that's where you'll find the book going out the door. But I'm looking forward to getting people to read it and give me feedback, because as it says, Be More Wrong. It might be the wrong book for you, but let's see what your thoughts are. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.